So they're Seder in Israel, no?
we need to understand a couple things about the Haggadah. First of all, the Haggadah that we use today was compiled after the destruction of the Second Temple, right around the end of the destruction of the Second Temple. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, when the temple stood, the Haggadah, meaning the whole evening of Pesach, the Seder, revolved about the Korban Pesach. Through of course, there was a chabura gathered, families gathered together, and they celebrated the Seder, and they sent a delegation of one or two men to take the gedi, the little goat, to the Beis Hamikdash. It was there the Kohanim, or you could chef the gedi, the Pesach was shefted. The innards were taken out. It was skinned, and the innards were taken out and put on the mizbeach. And then the rest of the gedi was put on a pole, and they carried it back to the family where they quartered it, maybe, or whatever they did, and they put it on the spit and they roasted it on an open fire. Now, while the people were going up to the Har Bayis and getting the gedi, the family sat down to what we would call the Seder. And what did they do? They discussed the halachas of the Korban Pesach. For instance, that it had to be tzuli, or for instance, it had to be you could not break a bone, or that you had to eat it by chatzos, or you cannot leave it over. Okay, all of these halachas that came about, why did they come about? Why was it tzuli? Why can't you break a bone? Why? Well, all these things were discussed in terms of the Exodus from Egypt. The first thing that was said, of course, was that it's the Passover lamb. Hashem passed over our houses. They talked about the blood on the doorpost. They talked about all of these things in the context of the Korban Pesach. We have a remnant to this in the Haggadah of today, where we say, what do we tell the Chacham, the son, the wise son? Also, you should tell him all the laws of the Korban Pesach until the very last law of Ein Maftir Nacha Pesach Avikomen. After you eat the Korban Pesach, you are not supposed to have anything else to eat. That's the last din of the Korban Pesach. Okay, now the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. And the whole nature of the Haggadah, or what we call the Haggadah, the whole nature of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt, changed. No longer does it revolve around the Korban Pesach. Okay? It now starts with Maisa Rabbi Akiva. We talk about the story of all of the great rabbis that were assembled at the table of Rabbi Akiva celebrating Pesach. What were they doing at the table of Rabbi Akiva? Now we know that the Rabbi Eliezer was there, Rabbi Yeshua was there. They were the Rabbeim, they were the teachers of Rabbi Akiva. He was a student of theirs. We all know the story of Rabbi Akiva. It didn't start till he was 40. Anyway, these two great men, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, they were among his teachers. The din is, a person has to, after the temple was destroyed, where did you go to celebrate the Pesach? So the Gemara brings an obligation to go to where your Rebbe is. You know, Hasidim do this all the time. They go to the Rebbe's court for Yom Tov, for all the Yom Tov. But on Pesach, you had to go and visit your Rebbe for the celebration of Pesach. So the question is, if Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua were the Rabbi and they were the teachers of Rabbi Akiva, what were they doing in Bnei Brak?
The truth, they were secretly, within the night, they were afraid of the Romans.
Well, we'll see. Okay. There's a lot of things that arise up around this meeting in Bnei Brak. I deal with it more from a rational and a perspective of the language of what happened. So it says they all gathered before Rabbi Akiva, at the table of Rabbi Akiva, celebrate the Seder. So we asked the question, what were they doing there? They should have been by Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua. They should have gone, Rabbi Akiva should have picked himself up and gone to his Rebbe, not the Rebbe come to him. So there's a famous Gemara at the end of Masechtas Makos, which says that the Tanoim, a number of Tanoim, amongst them Rabbi Akiva, went up to the Har HaBayis. Now the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And they saw a fox running around among the ruins of the Beis Hamikdash. And they all started to cry, except for Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva started to laugh. So they said to Rabbi Akiva, why are you laughing? He said to them, why are you crying? He says, why are we crying? We're standing in a place where Kohen Gadol was the only one permitted to enter into. When the Beis Hamikdash stood, only a Kohen Gadol could go here. And now we see foxes and animals and running around. It's all desolate. It's all been destroyed. Of course we're going to cry. So Rabbi Akiva says, L'kach ani mitzachek. That's the very same reason that I'm laughing. I say to him, what do you mean? He says, the Navi says, God saying, I will bring testimony from two trusted witnesses, as Uriah HaKohen veZechariah HaNavi. Uriah the Kohen, who was one of the Kohanim Gedolim, and Zechariah, who was a Navi from the Treosar, from the 12 minor prophets. I'm going to bring Adis, as the Hashem speaking. I'm going to bring witnesses. Uriah HaKohen of Zechariah. Says the Gemara, Ma inyan Uriah etz Zechariah. What does the Navi mean by combining Uriah with Zechariah? Uriah b'bayas Rishon, with Zechariah b'bayas Shem. Uriah lived in the time of the first temple, and Zechariah lived at the end of at the time of the second temple, the destruction of the second temple, towards the end. So the question is, why are they mentioned together? How could they be witnesses? They lived in different eras. Okay, read about here, and we're going to say, so Rabbi Akiva says, that was Rabbi Akiva's question. What are they doing together? So Rabbi Akiva said, Ad shelo niskaima nevuas Uriah, until nevuah of Uriah did not become fulfilled, who said, Sion soda ticharesh, Zion will be plowed under like a field, meaning the Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed. You can't be Makayim, the nevuah of Zechariah, who said, O Dieshu Zekenim Zekenos B'Chovos Yerushalayim. The old and the young will all once again be present in the streets of Jerusalem, and they'll be happy, they'll be rejoicing. So first Sion had to be destroyed, and then it had to be rebuilt, and then it's going to be rebuilt. What did the rabbi say? Oh, nichamtanu, Akiva nichamtanu. You have appeased us, placated us, Akiva. You have comforted us. What is this Gemara talking about? What did Rabbi Akiva say? I'm telling you, there's a prophecy that we will once again rejoice in Jerusalem. He has to fish it out of a minor prophet, Zechariah. Yirmiyahu HaNavi talks about the Jews will come back. Yeshayahu HaNavi talks about the Jews will come back. Nachamu Ami. Yecheskel HaNavi prophesies over the third Beis Hamikdash will be built. What is he going to a prophet from the Treosar? That's what you call in the English is the minor prophets, the 12 minor prophets. He could have brought statements from, Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, and Yecheskel, the three great Nevi'im. What is he doing looking for a proof to them that there's going to be a final redemption from Zechariah? And second of all, what Rabbi Gamliel and the Tanoim who were with Rabbi Akiva, they didn't believe in what Yecheskel said there's going to be a third Beis Hamikdash. They didn't believe in what Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu said. What they waited for Rabbi Akiva to tell them something from Zechariah. They didn't know. They knew everything in the Torah. They knew Yirmiyahu, Yeshayahu, and Yecheskel. They knew those prophecies. So why all of a sudden did they say you comforted us?
Good question.
You had a question? What were they doing in Bnei Brak? The answer is Rabbi Akiva was preaching, that Bar Kokhba was Mashiach. He felt that Bar Kokhba, who led the revolt against the Romans in around 130-ish, in the Common Era, he was the spiritual mentor of Bar Kokhba, and he was the one who said that Bar Kokhba should revolt against the Romans. So they're crying, and he's telling them, don't cry. It's going to happen now. It's going to happen in our days. That's why I picked this one sentence that links Uriah HaKohen and Zechariah HaNavi, and it says, Sion Sadet and Charesh for Odieshu Zekenim Zekenim. One is going to follow on the heels of the other. It's in one pasuk. That's what he went to Zechariah for. Not because they didn't believe in a redemption. These people that were gathered, they suffered through the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The merit of Bar Kokhba was some 60 years after the destruction of the second temple. They lived through the destruction of the temple. And then they came to Rabbi Akiva because Rabbi Akiva was telling them, in our days, friends, peers, Mashiach is going to reveal himself, and we are going to build the third Beis HaMikdash, because it's all linked in one pasuk. And that's why they came to Bnei Brak, because Rabbi Akiva held that Mashiach was going to come in their day. So they sat there, and Maisa Rabbi Akiva, they all sat in Bnei Brak, and they were derish. They changed the nature of the Seder. Instead of talking about the Korban Pesach, they changed the focus of the Haggadah. They made it that we should now, instead of spending time discussing the intricate laws of the Korban Pesach and through them developing the story, we're going to switch to put that aside, the Korban Pesach. We're going to focus on the story, yes.
Logically, it would have been more important to speak about the Korban if Mashiach is coming tomorrow.
No. But they were there because they were saying that now that we don't have the Korban, we're not going to sit here all night talking about what to do, how to do it, when to do it. We're going to talk about the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's what changed at that moment in history, or that Tekufa in history. And that's what starts our Haggadah off, because those Tanaim who were sitting there are the ones that develop our whole Haggadah. Right? We talk about, try to find a Haggadah that didn't have too many Pirushim. Yeah. I'll tell you what happens at my Seder. When I come to the Seder, first of all, if you have any grandchildren or young people, they come with their booklets, what the teachers tell them, this, that. I said, listen, close all that up. Who wants to hear what your teacher said? I want to hear how you feel. This is an experiential event. This night of the Seder of Mitzrayim, Chayav Adam Lirasis Atzmo Ki Iluhu Yotza Mitzrayim. We need to recreate the experience of the night that the Jewish people achieved redemption and exited from Egypt. How can me a chinik with this rabbi said that and that rabbi said this? What's the experience? You need to experience Yetzias Mitzrayim. So I usually tell them to close their Haggadahs and try to get one Haggadah with no Mefarshim and focus on what the Baal Haggadah is trying to tell us. So let's see, this Haggadah's got a little bit here. So first of all, it starts off Maisa, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Loza ben Uzariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Mesu, and Bnei Brak. Then it goes to Amar Rabbi Loza ben Uzariah. He teaches us something. Oh my goodness. Who is this? Hi, I'm in the middle of giving a share and it's Chabad. Okay, bye-bye. So, that's one thing. Then we talk about Hillel, we talk about Shammai, we talk about all these things. This is all from the Tanoim, from the scholars who lived in that Tekufah, how they impacted on retelling the events of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay, that's just by way of introduction. Now we need to understand that the Haggadah is divided into three different parts. One is what happened in Egypt, and there's that difference of opinion. Do we start with the Chazal tell us you have to start beginai, Umasayim b'shevach. You start with denigration, the fall of our people, and then you go to the victory, the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the defeat of Paro, and our exodus from Egypt. Why do we do that? Because in order to understand and appreciate the salvation, you have to first understand what transpired before it. What did we go through? What pain? What suffering? What aggravation did we go through? And then boom, we get a glorious victory. So there's a period of decline, and then there's a difference of opinion. What is the emphasis of this decline? Is it that we initially were idolators? We began by being idolators, or is the beginning avodim hayinu? No, the 200 and some years that we were slaves to Paro. What is our low point? So of course you understand the difference is it a spiritual low point or a physical low point? The physical low point is when we were enslaved. The spiritual low point was when we were idolaters. So there's this difference of opinion, and the Ritva says that they really don't argue. Both agree. The question is, which one should we emphasize first? But okay, we have this difference. Okay, that's starting either all the way back with Terach, or we start all the way back with what happened at the beginning of Shemos, Chumash Shemos, where Paro enslaves us. That's the past. Talk about the past, we talk about the Exodus, we talk about the plagues, we talk about how we emerged from there, we talk about the victory. Then we get to Vihisha Omdal Avoseinu V'lanu. This is what stood us in stead. What is what stood us in good stead? The promise. Baruch Shomer Haftachaso Yisrael. Blessed is the one who keeps his promise to Israel, that in every generation they will arise against us to defeat us, right? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyodam. God will save us from their hands. So every generation, meaning today, our generation, right here, Hamas is who knows what, terrible. Okay, we're suffering from that. When we have hostages, we have soldiers dying, we're fighting, we're doing all this. This is what has enabled us to withstand all of this. 2,000 years of not exactly happy history. And what's going on here is the only thing that keeps us preserved to this day is the fact that Hashem is our benefactor, in a sense, and we are guaranteed an existence, a perpetual existence. That promise that Hashem made is what keeps us going. That's the present. Then we switch to the future. We will say or sing before God a new song. Over our freedom and our redemption, the final redemption. So we have the past, we have the present, and we have the future, all encompassed in the Haggadah that we will recite on the Seder night. So that's just to understand the breakup or the breakdown of the three parts that constitute the Haggadah. Now I want to focus on one other thing. And this happens at my Seder almost every single year. First of all, when I first got married, my wife and I would take turns. Of course, we lived in the United States. We lived in Baltimore. My father was a rabbi in Queens. My father-in-law was a rabbi in Brooklyn. One year we would go for the Sedorim, the two Seders, to my father-in-law, and the next year we would go to my father, and that's what we switched off from one to the other. When I was about, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what year, somewhere around 25 or 26, my grandfather of blessed memory calls me up, and he spoke to me in Yiddish, and he says to me, Avrum Moshe, that's my name, Shishin Zeit as du machst Seder allein. It's time for you to make your own Seder and stop schlepping to New York and going to your parents or your in-laws. Und ich komm, and I'm coming to your Seder. So the very first Seder that Sharon and I had in our home was when my grandfather of blessed memory came and celebrated Pesach with us. One other great thing we were zeichet to was one year my father-in-law and my father Both came to celebrate Pesach with us. The only thing I can recall specifically about that Seder was I hardly can get in a word edgewise. Because between my father-in-law and my father, they sort of dominated the conversation. But generally speaking, I speak the whole time of the Seder. I raise all kinds of questions. I challenge people. I want them to feel the experience of the Seder. So anyway, here we are cruising along, reading the Haggadah, explaining various things, talking to each other, conversing about the experience of the Exodus from Egypt. And we get to this point in the Haggadah where there's a difference of opinion as to how many plagues struck. So, of course, we start off Dam Svardeya, we pour the wine off, whatever, 10 times to commemorate the 10 plagues. And then we come to Rabbi Yeshua says, or someone, I don't remember who says what.
From Shim.
You're
Right.
right. You know what? Before we even get to that, we take a pasuk, not a pasuk, 4 or so psukim from the Chumash in the aftermath, by the after Messias Mitzrayim, and the next generation, the first generation dies in the desert, and then a new generation rises up. The new generation is instructed to bring bikurim when they come into the land of Israel. They should take from the first fruits and bring them to the Beis Hamikdash. And there's a declaration that is said, Arami oivid ovi vayered Mitzrayma, vayisham goy gadol otzum bara vayorei osanu hamitzrim vayanunu vayitnu aleinu avodah kosher. There's a synopsis of the story of the Exodus from Egypt, and we talk about it in retrospect. This is what happened, and the Egyptians were cruel to us. And then the Baal HaGodah takes each phrase from that a section of the Torah and interprets it. Vayoreu osanu hamitzrim, what did they say? Vayanunu, what does that mean? Vayidnu aleinu avodah kosher, what does that mean? Anyway, we basically tear apart this 1, 3 or 4 sentences, and we spend a few pages in the Haggadah talking about what does it all mean. So the question is, why go to that point in the Haggadah? I mean, in the Torah. You want to tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, where would you turn?
The plagues.
To Exodus, to Shemos. And you would talk about how Paro said, let's enslave them, let's this, let's that. Then you talk about Moshe Rabbeinu's confrontation with Paro. And you talk about what Moshe Rabbeinu did. You talk about how he brought the temple. What are you jumping to Devarim, the end of the Torah, speaking to the next generation as a flashback to what happened? Why don't we go to the very story itself?
Because we are them. We are the following generation.
All right, we are the following generations, yes. Because you know what? Many times when you're in the experience, you don't appreciate it. It takes a retrospective. It takes a look back. Wow, do you realize what happened that day?
The
Do
good
you
old
realize
times.
what happened? What?
The
The good old times, yeah. So the Baal HaGodah wants us to know that we, like was pointed out here a moment ago, we are all looking back, reflecting back, because the experience itself was so overwhelming that it was so confusing, it was so blinding in a way that maybe we didn't gain exactly what was happening as it was unfolding. So we take a flashback. And that is done by the rabbis who were sitting around the table with Rabbi Akiva. And they are the ones that expound on this section. Okay, then we get to Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, who is at that Seder with Rabbi Akiva. Minayin Omer, how do you know that they got 10 in the land, and then by the sea they got 50, and he says there were 50. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, how long do you know? Not that they got 50, but they got 40. In Mitzrayim, they got 40, not 10, 40 Mitzrayim, 50 by the sea, and he adds up his number. Comes along Rabbi Akiva and says, how do we know that every makkah that God brought up against the Egyptians in Egypt was 5? So there were 50 in Egypt. Okay? B'Mitzrayim loku chamishim. Val hayam loku chamishim u'masayim. There were 250 plagues that struck the Egyptians by the sea before we crossed it. And there were 50 makas that struck the Egyptians in Egypt. Now the Torah says how many?
Okay.
10. What's with the 50? What's with the 250? First of all, we don't know what they were. It's like we would be sitting here and saying, what a great day today is. There are billions of asteroids out there, and not one of them has fallen on the Chabad base Midrash here in Yerushalayim. Wow, what a miracle. Does anybody say that? You know, every so often you read, oh, there was an asteroid that passed within a place 100 million miles of Earth or something, and I make a whole tumult about it. There are millions of asteroids out there. And not one of them, thank God, has struck us, although scientists say it struck it, that it killed the dinosaurs, whatever. But the point is, it didn't strike us right here now, and we got a tremendous miracle. It would wipe out Earth. We don't, because it's unidentifiable. It's not within our contemplation. We don't know what it means. We don't sit there and think about it. It's beyond our minds. It's out of a thought. It's out of our thoughts. So I'm going to tell you, know how many plagues there were in Egypt? 250. Does that mean anything? What were they? Can you identify any of those 250 plagues? Can you identify any of the other 50 plagues? We can identify dam svardeya kinim orub derushkin boradav. That we can identify. But we can't identify. These are numbers that are meaningless to us. So when we get to this point in the Haggadah, guess what? My wife says the food's going to get cold. Everybody's hungry. Let's move it along. If you have something to say, wait till after we eat, then we'll come back and we can say whatever you want. Why? Because at this point in the Haggadah, we sort of lose meaning. 250. What is Rabbi Akiva's point in saying 250? And this gets back to why they were all assembled in Bnei Brak. Rabbi Akiva was the mentor of the revolt. He was encouraging the Israelites, meaning the Jews of the time, to revolt against the mighty Roman Empire. Say his detractors or those who disagreed with him, Rabbi Akiva, with all due respect to your brilliance, 60 years ago, the Roman Empire crushed us. They destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. They took thousands, if not tens of thousands, of prisoners into captivity. They levied heavy taxes on us. They have dominated us. They control us. They subjugated us. We should revolt now, a mere 60 years later. We're still suffering from what we lost in the battle against the Romans the first time. How can you tell us to revolt? We're going to get crushed again. What did Rabbi Akiva say to them? Rabbi Akiva said to them, Kitzesi mi Mitzrayim erena niflos. The Navi says, when at our enaliflos, I will show the Jewish people miraculous wonders that will make the exodus from Egypt pale into insignificance.
Who said this?
The Gemara says this. The Navi says this. Not what I'm talking about. The Navi says this.
How is the wording?
Yeah, Kitzesi mi Mitzrayim, as you went out of Egypt, erena niflos, I will show you greater wonders, so that the exodus from Egypt will pale into insignificance. And that's what the Gemara also talks about, whether or not we'll even celebrate, what will we celebrate when Mashiach comes? Purim will celebrate. Will we celebrate the exodus from Egypt? So all the Mepharshim say, of course we will, but it will be downplayed. It will not have that central theme as it has now. So many mitzvahs are Zeichel Etzias Mitzrayim. We make Kiddush on Shabbos. And we proclaim Shabbos, Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos predated Yetzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos is we commemorate the creation of the world. Why do we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim in Shabbos? In the middle of the Kiddush, Friday night, we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Kivonu b'charta. What is that? What's it doing there?
We were born there.
Because Yetzias Mitzrayim changed the definition of creation. Of course, we're celebrating Shabbos, the creation, but until God intervened in history and changed history to benefit his people, everything just went along. It was like not, I wouldn't say automatic pilot, but it was in the natural flow of the creation. There was never God, did any power come to free a people from amongst the people and to free us from slavery? Hashem intervened in history and he redeemed us. By the way, we could ask a question. How come the Egyptians, suffered through all of those plagues and didn't come to their senses? I think I spoke about this here once, the battle of Paro between Paro and Moshe. But anyway, what did the Egyptians believe? They believed in social Darwinism. You know what social Darwinism means? It means survival of the fittest. The strong control the weak. The weak fall away. In the plant life, if you plant a strong a tree that draws nourishment from the ground and you have a little, something bush next to it, the tree will suck all the minerals and all the water out of the soil, and the other plants will die and either if they don't die, they'll become very, very weak plants because the strong draw the minerals and the water from the earth. The strong control the weak. The sick, they end up being sickly. They can't fight. They can't they don't control. They either die or whatever, if they don't get well. And the strong dominate. Paro believed he was the strong. He dominated. There was a certain implicit order in the world, which Darwin came along, thousands of years later, instead, biological survival of the fittest. What?
Herbert Spencer, social Darwinism.
Yeah, social Darwinism. That's what Paro believed in, and therefore he said, a God is not a God who's omnipotent, who's so great. He's gonna champion these dregs of society, this place, avodim, slave. Nah. He favors the rich. He favors the strong. That's why he made me strong. That's why he made me ruler over Egypt. That's why the gods made me ruler over Egypt, because I'm strong, I'm smart, I'm wealthy, I'm whatever it is. That's the point. That's what the Egyptians believed. They could not put their heads around that there was a God that was going to champion a defeated, demoralized, slave mentality people. Anyway, so what is the number of these plagues for? Why is Rabbi Akiva saying there were 250 plagues and he does not identify them? He's saying, do not be afraid of engaging the Romans. Do not be afraid of revolting another time, because this is the time of the Messiah. This is the time of the end of days. This is going to be such a miraculous victory that the miracles that took place in Egypt pale into insignificance. You know how many plagues God brought on the Egyptians? 250. You know what's going to happen to the Romans? God's going to strike them. They're going to die in their boots. They're going to die in the fields. They'll die. He doesn't, he didn't have to define it. What he basically said was the miracles that are going to happen when the end of days arrive are so awesome, are so overwhelming, that Rome will be nothing. It will not be able to stand up to the might of Israel through the delivery of Hashem. And that's why.
Is there a meaning in 250?
Well, when you get to the Haggadah, you look in all these little portions. Okay, but the point I'm trying to make is the Baal Haggadah is talking about the Amos HaMashiach at this point. This is the third stage, when we go into the third stage of the Haggadah, the future. The future is bright. The future is great. The future, we will be indefeatable. We will not be able to be defeated. The miracles will be so rampant and so obvious and so powerful that we will destroy any and all opposition. That's what's happening here in the Haggadah. That's why all of these numbers are being sprouted. Let's see what happens right after that. We go to the Dayenu, and we talk about what? Ilu Nisonu Eretz Yisrael. They come to Eretz Yisrael. And now Now all of this also now we have so much to be thankful for. And now Rabbi Gamliel returns to the celebration of the Pesach in the Beis Hamikdash. Kol shelo yomar Pesach matzah umara, who doesn't say, it doesn't matter me, he doesn't say. It means he doesn't emphasize. Pesach, the korban, matzah, the bread of affliction, morar, the bitter herb, which was really unbelievable. We took the matzah and Hillel. What did Hillel do with the matzah? He made a sandwich out of it. He took matzah, he put the korban Pesach, then he put the morar, because the morar was like ketchup, it like was a condiment. And then he put another layer of matzah. By the way, they didn't have matzah like we have. They had matzah like making the Spartan, and they made a sandwich out of it and they ate it.
Shemani is awful.
Another aside, despite what many people will tell you, the manufacture of matzahs that we have today, whether it be hand matzahs or machine matzahs, they take that thing and they make a roll and they make the little holes in it, and it's very thin and it's rolled. In the time of the Gemara, and actually in the Shulchan Aruch, a matzah can be 4 fingers thick. You ever see a matzah 4 fingers thick? The Ramah said that's better if you just make it as thick as your thumb. You ever see a matzah that thick? Why don't we see matzahs that thick? Except by the Spartan. They have to make it fresh. What happens if you take a pita, and you leave it out for 6-7 days? It crumbles. It crumbles. You can't have a matzah like that and start baking it on Hanukkah, which is when they start to bake in Yerushalayim and in Chutz La'aretz. Matzahs are started at Hanukkah because they ship them all over the world to places that don't have matzahs, or they ship them to the marketplace here. How did those matzahs survive? If they were Teimani matzahs, they would crumble and fall apart and nobody would have. So they decided to make them wafer thin, put holes in them, and they make them like crackers. How long can a cracker last? Long time. A long time. A matzah can last a long time. That's really how the transformation of matzahs from how the Teimanim or the Sephardim do it to how the Ashkenazim do it was in order to be able to ship matzahs and maybe to make sure that they have a long shelf life. Now, I know there are people who are going to tell me that it's only so you should be so certain that there's no chametz there, no this. Listen, it didn't happen 250 years ago, and they were just as worried about chametz as we are. Okay. Now, so then that's the story with the matzah. And that's what we did. No, so that gets back to what Hillel did. Hillel combined the Pesach, the matzah, and the morah, which is the way we should eat it if we had a Beis Hamikdash. Okay. Anyway, that's how the Haggadah unfolds, and then we talk about the whole door vador. So that's the past. We go into the future, or the present. Every generation they start up with us, and then we go into the Hallel, and therefore we switch gears and we praise Hashem, and we talk about the salvation of our people throughout history, and it was a very, very harsh history. And we say to Hashem, not in the Haggadah, but we say it to him in davening on Mondays and Thursdays. Notwithstanding everything that we, the Jewish people, have gone through over our bloody history, we have still clung to the belief in you, Hashem. How much longer can you forget us? We have not forgotten you. Please do not forget us. That's a very strong statement to make to Hashem. No, please, al tishkachem. Do not forget us. Okay, which we maybe will talk about around Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, or the power of passion and the power of prayer. How should we really pray to Hashem? It's not for today's discussion. Okay, so we get through the Haggadah, we get to the end, and we talk about Chad Gadya, we talk about Echad Miyodeya. We're getting into the point now where we're singing about the future. Shloisha say mi yodea, Shlomo say ani yodea, Shlosha say mi daya. There are 13 attributes of God. Kel rachel, v'chanu, and erech apayim, rav chesed, v'yemes. You are the God of compassion and mercy, and you will redeem us, and you will keep us, and you will protect us. And that's how we close the By the way, I'm going to tell you another thing. We open the door. When do we open the door to welcome Eliyahu? First of all, what in the world is Eliyahu doing at our Seder? He was not in Egypt. He's not a part of the story of redemption. What is Eliyahu doing in our Seder? And besides that, why do we welcome him in at midnight? Machatzos Laila, we finish eating the afikomen. And the next thing we do is we say, Shvo chamoscha el hagoyim, cast out your anger against the goyim, and we open the door. What are we doing?
It's another redemption, the beginning of the redemption.
Oh, it's not just the beginning. We are saying to Benisan, Nigalu Avoseinu Mitzrayim, Nisan Asilim Higoel. We anticipate that in Nisan we will be redeemed. Who is going to be the Mavaser Tov? Who is the one that's going to bring us the news of the advent of the coming of Mashiach? So our tradition is it's Eliyahu. Hinei anochi sholech lachem es Eliyahu hanavi. Well, I'm going to send God speaking Eliyahu hanavi. V'heshiv leivavos albonim v'leibonim alavoisam. He will reconcile the differences in our generational gaps, and he will herald in and tell us about the coming of Mashiach. So, on this night of the Seder, when we have now transitioned to talking about the future redemption, we've abandoned the past, we've abandoned the present, we move into the future. The future is redemption. So at midnight, which was the moment of redemption in Egypt, what happened at midnight? God struck the firstborn of the Egyptians. And then the Egyptian people came running through the streets and says, get out of here. We can no longer tolerate this. Welcome. So anyway, that's the pshat. At that moment, we expect Eliyahu Hanavi to announce the coming of Mashiach. That's what we hope and what we anticipate. And therefore, we open the door to greet him, because that was when the Mitzrayim came and knocked on the door of the Jewish people. And when we opened the door, they said, leave our country. We can no longer tolerate your presence. We're all going to die. And therefore, that was the moment that they set us free. And that's the moment that we open the door. On the night of the Seder, we usher in Eliyahu Hanavi, and we hope and we pray that he will announce the advent of Mashiach and the end of all of the Golos. Now, when I say the end of the Golos, I mean he will announce the Geula Shalem, the ultimate redemption. Because really the Golos is over, but I've already told you that before. Okay. So that's really what's happening here the night of the Seder.
The Nevuah. What was the name of the Navi you said at the beginning?
Zechariah?
Zechariah. It doesn't speak of the Rabbi. It speaks of the land that is.
That's right.
That is what's happening now.
Zephaniah, we say every morning, what do you say? Zephaniah Navi, and he says what? Uvaes kapsi eschem, and the time when I will gather you in. Okay, wait a second. Uvaes kapsi eschem. I forget the Russian now by heart. Okay, God says to Zephaniah, I will make you a name and a glory in the eyes of all of the nations. Because we took this arid desert land and we transformed it into a major productive land that can produce and export. We can export fruits and vegetables, and we export many things.
Even water.
Even water. That was my next thing I was going to say. Even water. People would say we're in an arid land. I will make you a name and a glory to all of the nations. We are only 75 years old, and we have become a major power in so many different areas. In medical, technology, in medicine itself, and in the the equipment for medicines, all kinds of inventions the Israelis have made in medical technology. And we have also become an agricultural power. We, the Jewish people here in Israel, invented cherry tomatoes. We do all kinds of things. Our fruits are delicious. Our produce is delicious. We export it. And we know how to grow in arid lands. We have water conservation that we export to California. We have all kinds of things that we teach the world. This is an unbelievable, miraculous country. But when it comes time for Mashiach to come, the miracles will wane. Maybe these are part of those great miracles, but they will be awesome miracles. Mitzvah Hashem, this Pesach, we should have such great, great miracles. So I've rushed you right along through the Haggadah, and hope you get a flavor of what we're trying to accomplish, what the Chazal were trying to accomplish the night of the Seder. Focus on the three aspects, past, present, future, and try to extrapolate from the text what the Baal Haggadah is trying to tell us.
כאילו יצאנו, how can we feel nowadays?
Yeah, how do we
what's
feel
going
nowadays? How do you try to feel as if the Rambam says you have to point to somebody who's a servant, and you say, you see that servant? That's how we were, in worse condition than that servant. And look how we're sitting here, and that servant is serving us. No, it's really amazing. We have these Moldavans, these Bulgarians. We have all these Mesharsim that come here to earn money. You know what I'm talking about?
Filipinos.
Well, Filipinos weren't Europeans. We have many Europeans who come here, who spat on us just one or so generations ago, who mocked us and ridiculed us and demeaned us. And if they didn't kill us, they facilitated people that killed us. And all of a sudden, they're serving us. They have to clean up, and we tell them, clean up here. You didn't do it over again. We're telling them what to do. We're bossing them around in a sense. Well, we pay them, but basically we're not enslaving them, but we have the upper hand in that relationship. It must blow their minds to think that just one short period of history later, we're up, they're down.
That's why they hate us.
How could that be? That's why they hate us. Well, they hate us because they hate us. We've done so much good for them and their world. Look, they send all their money back to their families. What would they do without us? They don't appreciate that part of it. And of course, we try to treat them kindly. We don't sit there and beat them. I think Saudi Arabia, they beat them. Okay, we treat them kindly, and we pay them. We pay them more than we pay teachers. Okay, so it's not like exactly we're abusing them, but they must feel that to some degree, like you said, they're resented, but ultimately we're doing them a big favor. We're helping them a lot. Okay, Mitzvah Hashem, we should be zecha to a Gula Shalema this Pesach. The Mashiach should come. Yad bersonenu tachtenu, v'yikayam bonu hakosuf, ki Adonai Elohechem ha'olech imochem, v'yilachem lachem, v'im oyevechem, v'hoshia eschem, v'namar amen.
Amen.
Thank you.